Welcome to Table for One. I'm the narrator, and this video is a rules refresher for the Carnomorphs expansion to Nemesis. Let's get rolling. Alright, and I'm all set up to teach you how to play with the Carnomorphs expansion. These are replacement intruders for Nemesis. And so there will be chapter markers, but I'll start with giving you the different setup instructions, and then I will, after that, talk about the different gameplay instructions. And of course, don't forget, at the same time I'm releasing this video, I am releasing a solo playthrough using the Carnomorphs expansion as well, and I'll be using these two characters, the CEO and the Convict. And then at the end of this video, I will give you my, my final thoughts on the Carnomorphs expansion as well. So let's dive right into it. You can see I've done a lot of the setup already. All of the setup I've already done is everything that's consistent with the base game. So let's run through it real quick. I'll try and go maybe left or right. So we've got our coordinates card. We start on location B. We've got 2 escape pods for this 2-player game. We have all of the number 1 rooms out, 5 of the random number 2 rooms on the board as well, and then an exploration token, just a standard exploration token on each of the room tiles. There are no new exploration tokens with this expansion. We don't do anything like we saw in the Void Seeders expansion where we were putting tokens, or I guess in the Aftermath expansion as well, we're putting tokens in the engine rooms or the hibernatorium or the cockpit. None of that, just on the room tiles. And then as for the number 2 rooms, all number 2 rooms in the game, including those that come with the Aftermath expansion, are compatible with Carnomorph, so you can mix and match that however you like. Then in the hibernatorium, we've got our blue starting character corpse as well as our 2 character minis for the 2 players who are in the game. And then we've got our 3 engines here with the engine tile shuffled up. And a note on the characters, just to clarify, again, I will be doing a solo playthrough, but I've been playing in this series 2-handed solo, so I've been playing cooperatively. So that's why I've got 2 characters on the board. Speaking of characters, all the character setup is what you would expect. So you need your character board, your custom action deck, your starting items, which I zoomed in a little bit. So normally these heavy objects would be in players' hands, but you wouldn't be able to see it. So we've got our heavy objects, our starting objects here, our quest items, our traits if you're playing with the traits, and then your first player token here. Then we've got our infection scanner up there, our item decks, our contamination deck, and our serious wounds deck. Those are all as normal. So now let's start to go over the differences. And we'll go ahead and start with some other decks of cards that we'll be putting in here. So the original Intruder attack cards are replaced with a deck of Carnomorph attack cards. And there's a real quality of life improvement in these cards. In previous versions of the game and with other expansions, there were times when, depending on who the enemy that attacked you, you would need to draw either 1 or 2 cards and compare the number in the top left. But in this expansion, they just give you 2 numbers with the little symbols for, hey, if it's this type of enemy, this is your number. If it's that type of enemy, this is your number. So that's really nice. I appreciate that change. That was a good design choice. Then this game comes with a custom event deck. You can see the backs are different than the normal event deck from the base game of Nemesis. So if you want to combine this with some of the Aftermath stuff like epilogue mode or research mode, then the backs of the events will be different. So you can still do that, but you'll need to shuffle it up and then draw from the bottom so you don't know what type of event is coming up next. So if you want to start combining expansions, that's how you would use Carnomorphs. And finally, we have this deck here of character mutations. This is a new mechanic for Carnomorphs. I'm just going to set this off to the left side where I've got a little bit more room. We're going to talk about character mutations in detail in the gameplay section. Then we need to add our intruder board. This is a Carnomorph board this time, and it's going to start with 8 eggs in the nest, which I believe is all the eggs that come with the game. So this is a departure from the base intruder board as well as the Void Seeders intruder board. Both of those you started with 5 eggs in the nest. So we've got all 8 eggs in the nest for the Carnomorph board now. And then there are no intruder weakness cards for the Carnomorphs. Instead, we have these Carnomorph adaptation cards. And these are really cool. We'll talk about the mechanics of these in the gameplay section, but you're going to add 3 Carnomorph adaptation cards This is one of my favorite new mechanics. And then you'll notice we still have Character Corpse, Intruder Carcass, and Intruder Egg listed here on this board for your research actions to sort of discover things. We'll talk about the mechanics, but above those three types of heavy objects, it says Shambler, Flesh Beast, and Butcher, which you'll notice here are three types of enemies. You're going to place one of the minis for each of those types where it says its name. So you're going to put a Shambler here. And quick note on the minis. Of all the minis in this game, these are, I think, the creepiest. And I've got the pre-shaded ones. I think they're really well done. They freak me out. They kind of remind me thematically of the Necromorphs from the Dead Space series of video games, if you've ever played those. But these are super scary. Carnomorphs are nightmare fuel for me more than some of the other intruders in this game. So the next one is the Flesh Beast. There's three of those. There's 8 Shambler minis in the box. There's 3 of these Flesh Beasts. They're pretty scary as well. And then the Butcher, and there's one of these. And this is maybe my favorite mini from this whole series. It's super scary. It's the one on the cover of the box for Carnomorph, so you're going to place the Butcher mini there. Next, we need to set up our Intruder Bag with our Intruder tokens. So during setup, you're going to add 1 blank token that comes from the base game box, 2 blue Metagorger tokens. The base game box comes with 3 of those. This is the old symbol for creepers. So the base game, you'll notice the back has 1 on each of those. 2 come with the Carnomorphs expansion, and there's a 1 and a 2. So you can just shuffle up all 5 of them and then put 2 of them in the bag to start the game. But just note that when you put everything away, the one with the 2 should go in the Carnomorphs box. You don't want to accidentally put that in your base game box. And then you're also going to add 2 red Metagorger tokens. These come with the Carnomorphs expansion. It comes with a whole bunch of these red ones. And then on top of that, you're going to add 1 red Metagorger token for each character that is in the game. So 2 in this 2-handed solo game. And that is how you set up the initial Intruder Bag. So I'm going to set that to the side. And that's it for setup. So not too bad. I like how this one just feels a lot more streamlined and better integrated with the original Nemesis game than the Void Seeders did to me. That one had a lot of extra setup stuff, but this was actually pretty simple. And so now let's start talking about some of the gameplay differences. And I do want to call out this gameplay manual is probably the best one for the Nemesis series that I've seen to date. It's actually really clear. So they did a really good job with this one. But the first thing we're going to talk about is mutations. This is an important part of how this intruder type works. And so let's go over the intruder types again from biggest to smallest. So we've got the Butcher, the Flesh Beasts, and there's 1 Butcher, 3 Flesh Beasts. The Shambler, there's 8 of those. And then there are Metagorgers. There are 2 sculpts of the Metagorgers, and they're these little guys down here. And so those are in the box. There's 8 of those. They're super creepy. And then there is no analog for larva in this game. So we've just got the queen token, the breeder token, the adult token. These Metagorgers use the blue and red creeper tokens, and then there are no larvae. So we're going to be talking about mutation. Let me talk very quickly at high level about how it works. You can gain these mutation cards. You can only have 1 at a time, and you can also gain mutation markers. Mutation markers are just these red cubes that we use for for damage marking on the intruders, and that we use for ammo. And if you ever get a mutation marker, you place it here on the picture of your character mini on your player board. I said you can only have up to 1 character mutation card at a time. If you're ever supposed to gain one and you already have one, you just completely ignore it. You don't have to do anything. Now, if you're ever supposed to gain a mutation marker, if you have a character mutation card already, then you just gain the marker, as I stated. If you're supposed to gain one of these markers and you have no card, instead you gain a character mutation card. So that's kind of how that flows. You must have a card to gain the markers. If you're supposed to gain a marker and have no card, gain a card instead. You can only have 1 card at a time, so if you have a card and you're instructed to gain a card, you just ignore that. You keep the card that you have and you don't gain another, and you don't gain a mutation marker in its place. Now, if you have no card and you're instructed to gain one, then you take 2 of these character mutation cards off the top of the deck, look at them both, select the one you want, and place it face down next to your character board. The one you did not select, place it back in the deck, shuffle the deck so it's in there but nobody knows where, and then place the deck back wherever you're storing it near the table. So once you've placed this next to your character board, you can look at it, but it is a private card. You don't need to show it to anybody, at least not yet. Now, what these cards do are they allow you to take a mutation action. So if you want to take a mutation action, the first time you do it, you then reveal the card and then it stays face up next to your character board. So some of these will be only in combat, some are only when you're not in combat, some have no such requirement, but each of these mutations has two sections. The top part is infected, the bottom part is not infected. In order to take this action, you must have a contamination card in hand, and you spend the contamination card to take the action. Now, what you do is you take the card and you scan it. And I guess before you scan it, when you are going to take your character mutation action, again, you must have a contamination card in hand, at least one. And when you take the action, you must add a mutation marker to your character board. That's sort of the cost. Then you take the contamination card from your hand and you scan it. And then if it is not infected, you discard the card completely. You remove it, gain a new contamination card and place it in your discard pile, and then you resolve the not infected effect. That is the proper order of events. Instead, then, if you scan the card and it is infected, then you just keep it and you put it directly at the top of your discard pile, and then you perform the infected effect. Now, in general, these effects are very similar, but the infected one is stronger. So you're like weirdly incentivized to have more infected contamination cards. And if your card is not infected, then you're discarding it, but still gaining another. So you don't have any less contamination, but you're like increasing your odds of getting more infected cards, which could give you a more powerful effect. And these are all really cool powers. They're all unique. All these cards in this deck are unique. And the major theme of this expansion is mutation. So you are mutating, if that wasn't clear. Your character is mutating. And some of these effects, you're trying to use it to your advantage. Some of these things may be abilities that could negatively impact or potentially negatively impact other players in the game. So that's why you can keep this secret, or you should keep it secret until the first time that you use it. So the other players, especially when you're playing semi-co-op, don't quite know what you could potentially have. And then that's also why when you draw two cards, keep one, put one back in the deck, you shuffle it up. So the other card that you did not select, you never quite know if somebody else later gets that card or not. All right, so we've talked about the mechanics of gaining a mutation card and then how to use its effects. And we've talked a little bit about adding mutation markers to your character board, but we haven't talked about the drawbacks of these mutation markers. So if you overuse it, if you use it too much, it will eventually kill you. So when you have your fourth mutation marker on your character board, your character dies. That happens immediately. So if you get your fourth mutation marker on your character board, remove your mini from the game, you're dead, replace yourself with a character corpse, and a Shambler mini enters the room as well. So replace yourself with a red character corpse token and a Shambler. Now, let me point this out because it's written in tiny text in the rulebook. It's not highlighted, but it is important. The mutation markers, there is no game effect that allows you to remove mutation markers. So once you get those, it's permanent, and 4 is the hard limit. 4 will kill you. But it is possible to get rid of your character mutation card. That can be done by either using the antidote item or by finding the surgery room and using the room action. In both of those cases, you can remove the mutation. It doesn't say what to do with the mutation card, but I would assume just put it in the character mutation deck and shuffle it up again. And that can be really important because remember, if the game ever tells you to gain a mutation marker and you do not have a mutation card, you gain a card instead. So that can limit the amount of mutation markers that you're gaining here in your character board and ideally keep you alive longer. So I would expect to see in the event deck events that tell you to either gain a character mutation or events that tell you to gain a mutation marker. Those are likely to be in there somewhere. Let's put the Shambler back. Replace the character mini, put this token away. Now let's talk about this Carnomorph board because this is pretty neat too. So there are no Metagorgers on this board, but there is again a Shambler, a Flesh Beast, and a Butcher. The first time any of those intruder types enters play, you take the mini from the board instead of from the box. And so let's say that this Shambler comes out and enters play here. When you do that, when you take the mini from the board, you then reveal the Carnomorph adaptation below it. And instead of being intruder weaknesses, these all give the intruders extra powers. Now, unless otherwise specified, these powers will strengthen all of the Carnomorph mini types, all of the various types of intruders, not just the Shamblers. So this particular one is called Agile. It says when you roll the combat die, when you roll this result, which is the Creeper or Metagorger symbol, treat it instead as a blank. And again, there are 2 of that symbol on this die, so that essentially makes it a 50-50 chance of missing right off the bat. So then if you want to get rid of this adaptation, you now need to scan the character corpse, using the standard laboratory action. So when the Flesh Beast comes out, you reveal this adaptation. If you want to get rid of that adaptation, you must scan an intruder carcass. And when the Butcher comes out, this 3rd adaptation comes into play, and you must scan an intruder egg to remove it. And very importantly, until these are revealed, you cannot scan and remove. So if there are no Shamblers out yet in this example, but we have a character corpse and we bring it to the laboratory, we cannot scan it to remove this adaptation before revealing it. It must be revealed before we are able to remove it. So that is going to make things difficult for at least a time. And then just to be clear, once a Shambler comes out, if you then destroy this Shambler or any other Shambler that is then out, it just goes back to the box. They never get returned here to the board. It's just the very first one you take from here and then flip the card, and then you no longer ever return them back to that board. But this is how it looks during setup. Now, since we're over here, let's talk about the Butcher, because the Butcher's pretty cool. There's a couple unique rules to the Butcher. One, this enemy type is so large that it cannot enter technical corridors. So if it was, for example, here in Engine Room 1 and it was supposed to move through corridor 2 or 3, it would just fail and then stay here. It's too big to go through technical corridors. So that's kind of fun. And then additionally, the Butcher is completely unique. So if the Butcher is ever killed and removed from the board by any effect or for any reason, you can never add a new Butcher to the game. So you just return this to the game box and it's gone. There's no game effect that can bring it back into the game. So only one Butcher. And then a note now on these blue and red Metagorger tokens. We'll talk more about how they differ later. It's really during bag development. But the important thing to note is anytime you're supposed to add a Metagorger token to the intruder bag, always add a red if there's one available. Again, that is a blanket statement. Anytime for any reason you're supposed to add one of these any Metagorger token to the intruder bag, always add a red one if a red one is available. You may only add a blue one if there are no more red ones. But once we get to bag development, we'll talk about what that means. Now, most Carnomorph attacks work the same way as any other intruder attack, the way you'd probably expect, with the exception being the little guys, the Metagorgers, who are really not that little compared to your character minis. They're still pretty frightening. But anytime a Metagorger attacks a character, normally you would draw a Carnomorph attack card when something attacks, but the Metagorgers are a little bit different. So let's put this Metagorger here in this Hibernatorium. Let's say the Metagorger is attacking this convict. The first thing you do is you immediately take a light wound and you gain a Contamination card to the top of your discard deck. And then if you do not have a Mutation card yet, you draw a Mutation card. So again, you would draw the top 2, take a look, pick one, place it face down next to your character board, place the other back in the deck, shuffle up the deck. If you already have a Mutation card, as discussed earlier, you just skip that step, but you still gain the light wound and a Contamination card. Then you remove the Metagorger from the game board, and you add a Shambler token to the intruder bag. So this is super thematic, and it is really internally consistent. I like the way this works. Basically, the Metagorger, we said this expansion is all about mutations. It's not just about your characters mutating, but really these Carnomorphs are mutation based and they're evolution based. They're going to evolve into each other. So Metagorgers will become Shamblers. Shamblers will become Flesh Beasts. Flesh Beasts can become a Butcher. And so when a Metagorger, when the smallest ones attack you, you don't draw an attack card. Instead, just think of it as like they bit you. So you become contaminated and a little bit injured and maybe gained a mutation from them. And then they have mutated as well. So they disappear, they ran off somewhere, and then you add a Shambler token into the bag. So they've gone off and hidden and evolved into a Shambler, and you may draw them later in the game. So I think that's really cool. We're going to see that play out a little more in the event phase. But the next thing we need to talk about is Carnomorphs gaining injuries and Carnomorphs dying. Now, Carnomorphs getting injured works the same way you'd expect it to. I'm just pointing out again, even though I talked about it earlier. When you attack a Carnomorph and you hit them, add the damage tokens, and then you draw the top card from the deck, and you just, again, look, what type of enemy is it? And then you check next to that symbol, what is the corresponding number? And if the number of damage tokens is the same or more than that number that's revealed here, then you've killed the Carnomorph. So that's, again, a pretty good quality of life improvement. You're just always drawing one card, but there may be multiple different results on it. So just follow the results for the enemy type that you've attacked. Then, if the enemy is killed and it is a Metagorger, so the little ones, or a Shambler, in either of those cases, remove the mini from the board and add an Intruder corpse token, Intruder Carcass, that's the word, Intruder Carcass token to the room where it was killed. So that works the same way you would expect it to from base game Nemesis. So the little guys, the Metagorgers, and the Shamblers, they work the way that you're familiar with. If you kill a Flesh Beast, so let's say that was in the Hibernatorium, if you kill a Flesh Beast, you still add an Intruder Carcass to the board in that same room, but you also add a Shambler. So the Flesh Beast, you're not so much killing it as you are like hacking a big lump off, and part of it is still moving around. So that is pretty terrifying. And then if you should happen to kill the Butcher, you remove its miniature. And remember, the Butcher can, once it's killed, can never come back. So put it back in the game box so you don't accidentally grab it again. The Butcher, once killed, is permanently killed. And in the room where you killed it, you do not put an Intruder corpse instead, or carcass, I always do that. Instead, you add 2 Shamblers. So it's like you split the thing in half, and it's really like it's made up of 2 Shamblers. And so you can kind of cleave it into 2 pieces, and now you've got 2 Shamblers to deal with. And just a reminder, when you kill a Flesh Beast or a Butcher and you're adding Shamblers to the board this way, you're not taking any Shambler tokens out of the Intruder bag. Anything that's in the bag is still in the bag. So these things can get real dangerous real fast. Now, before we start talking about the event phase, there's one other thing we need to talk about, and that's random encounters. So if there is ever an encounter, meaning you need to draw a token from this bag to determine what type of enemy attacks you. It works largely the way that you're familiar with the one note that if you draw the blank token, instead of an encounter, you surround the noise where the encounter was supposed to take place, or you surround the room where the encounter was supposed to take place with noise, and then you add a Metagorger token to the bag. Remember, always preferring red if you have red as opposed to blue. Add one of these to the bag, and then I don't know if this is an oversight or not, but the rules are not explicit. They don't say to return this blank token to the bag like they typically do. So as far as I'm concerned, if you draw the blank token, you surround the room with noise, and then this token is discarded. It's just gone. Now, if this was the last token in the bag, it additionally says to add a Metagorger token to the bag. And if you do that, again, make sure you are preferring the red tokens over the blue. As long as you have a red one, you're adding a red one to the bag. You can only add a blue one if there are no red ones remaining. Now, let's get into the event phase. This is largely going to work the way that you're familiar with it, but there's one new step, which is feeding, that we need to talk about. And then we'll talk about Intruder Bag development, because there's something a little extra special there. And after we've gone through that, we'll just talk about the contamination check at the end of the game, but we're getting close. So during the event phase, the first thing that happens is you advance the time track, no change there. The next thing is any Carnomorphs who are in combat will attack, no change there. But there is something else that happens during this attack step, and that is feeding. So feeding happens whenever there's a Carnomorph that is not in combat, so in a room without a character, but it is in the same room as any heavy object, which is a character corpse, an Intruder Carcass, or an Intruder Egg, or in a room with a Metagorger, and that could include 2 Metagorgers who are in the same room. So if there are multiple Carnomorphs in the same room with either at least one Metagorger or any heavy object, they are going to feed. And you're going to resolve this in order from biggest to smallest. So the Butcher would feed first. If there are multiples, the Flesh Beast would eat second, and then Shamblers would eat after all the Flesh Beasts are done, and any remaining Metagorgers would eat after any remaining Shamblers are done. Now here's how feeding works. Anything that is feeding, first remove all of its injury markers, so it's going to completely heal itself. then it's going to evolve. So if it's a Metagorger, it will be replaced with a Shambler. If it's a Shambler, it'll be replaced with a Flesh Beast. If it's the Flesh Beast, it'll be replaced with the Butcher. And again, if it's the first time any of these minis are entering the game, take it from this Carnomorph board and reveal the Carnomorph adaptation below it. Now again, nothing can become a Butcher once the Butcher's been removed from the game. So if you've got a Flesh Beast and it is feeding and evolving, you would still remove its injury tokens, but you would just not replace it with a Butcher. And then in order to feed this evolution, it needs to eat something. So it will consume either the heavy object or the Metagorger that it is in the room with. So it'll just be removed from the board, and it'll do that in this order. First, it'll prefer to eat a red character corpse. So this is a character corpse that's dropped by somebody who had been a player in the game and had died. Secondly, it would prefer to eat an intruder egg. Third preference would be an intruder carcass. Its fourth preference would be a Metagorger. And then finally would be the blue character corpse token. That's the last thing it would want to eat. And then just like I said, there can only be one Butcher in the game. There's only 3 of these Flesh Beast minis. If by some chance all 3 of them are already in play and a Shambler is trying to evolve, again, treat it the same way that we treated it previously, where it would still heal all its wounds and it would eat something and it won't evolve. So let's go through this again. The 3 steps to feeding are: first, it heals, then it evolves into the next enemy type up, and then it consumes, it eats, preferring in this order. And again, this happens during the attack step of the event phase. Whenever a Carnomorph is in a room with no characters and at least one of these things, a heavy object or a Metagorger. So let me walk you through 3 quick examples. Let's say we've got this room here, there's no characters in it, and there are 2 Metagorgers in the room. So during the feeding step, you would select one of these 2 Metagorgers, you would remove all injury markers if it had any, you would replace its mini with a Shambler mini, and then it would have to consume the other Metagorger. That is what it chose to eat. Because again, there was no character corpse in the room, no egg in the room, and no intruder carcass in the room. So the next thing would be a Metagorger. So there's these 2 Metagorgers, and one of them ate the other and became a Shambler, and it healed its injuries. Now let's run through another example. Let's say we've got the nest here, and there is a Flesh Beast in there and a Metagorger. So there are no characters. We're during the feeding step. So we're going to resolve this from the biggest enemy down to the smallest. So the biggest one is the Metagorger. So it is going to remove any injury markers, and it'll get replaced with a Butcher if there has not been a Butcher yet. And then we go through this chart here. What's it going to prefer to eat? There's no character corpses, but there are eggs. All the eggs here are considered to be in the nest, so it would eat an egg. We'd remove it from that board. Then there's a Metagorger still here, so that is the next one in priority order. This one is going to eat. So again, we would remove any injury markers, replace it with a Shambler, and this too would consume an egg. Now let's do one more example back over here. We've got a Shambler and a Metagorger in here, again with no characters. Let's say there's a red character corpse and an intruder carcass token. So the Shambler is larger. That's going to eat first. We're going to remove any injury markers and replace it with a Flesh Beast. And then it prefers to eat this red character corpse. So that goes away. Next, there is a Metagorger in here. So that you again remove any injury markers, replace it with a Shambler, and it's going to consume this intruder corpse token. So that is how the feeding step works in the event phase. Again, it happens at the same time as intruder attacks, just whenever there is a Carnomorph in a room with no characters and at least one heavy object or Metagorger. I'll put some of these things back. Of course, probably don't need to say this, but let's say it anyway. If there's a room with no characters and only a single Metagorger and no heavy objects, the single Metagorger cannot eat itself. There's got to be at least one other Metagorger in the room for it to feed. And I think all of that is pretty internally consistent, pretty logical and thematic, so that's pretty neat. So then let's keep moving through the event phase. We would then have the fire damage step. We would then draw and resolve an event card, and then we have bag development. And this is where there's going to be a difference between those blue Metagorger tokens and the red Metagorger tokens. So it's bag development, and we draw a random token from the bag, and we get our blue Metagorger token. When you see the blue one, all characters who are not in combat roll for noise, and then then you remove the blue token from the bag and replace it with a red one. So this one goes away. So you start with a couple in the bag, but they're likely to disappear over the course of play. Now, let's say we're doing bag development, and instead we draw a red Metagorger token. That is going to be a bad day. When you get this red one, you are going to add one Metagorger to each room that already has a Metagorger. That includes rooms that where there are characters. So if there's a character in combat, if there's a Metagorger in there, it doesn't matter. Like any room with a Metagorger, you're going to add another one. Additionally, any room that has any heavy object, you're going to add a Metagorger to that room as well. If the nest is revealed and there are eggs in the nest, that counts too. If there are heavy objects in the hands of characters, if they're carrying a heavy object, that counts too. So these things are just going to explode all over the map. So again, if you draw the red Metagorger token during bag development, you add a Metagorger mini to every room that contains either a Metagorger or a heavy object, including if the heavy object is in a character's hand, and including the nest if there are still eggs in it on the intruder board. Then after you've done all that, you return the token to the bag. Now we're in the bag development step, and we draw either a Shambler token or a Flesh Beast token. In either of those cases, you just take the token, return it to the bag, and all characters who are not in combat perform a noise roll. So we're pretty familiar with that sequence of events already. Now, we're doing bag development, and we draw the Butcher, which is, the Queen token. If we draw the Butcher is coming into play. So when you draw that token, place the Butcher into a room containing a character with a slime marker on their character board, and then resolve an encounter. And then if there's more than one character with a slime marker, it's going to be the one with the fewest cards in hand. And then if it's a tie, use character order. Now, I take that to mean, starting with the player with the first player token and then going around the table that way, not whoever happens to be player number one, because that would just be a huge disadvantage to that player. And if there happens to be no character with a slime marker, then you just do it by player order. So whoever has the first player token is getting attacked by the Butcher. And then, of course, there can only be one Butcher. So in that event, you remove this token from the bag. And then finally, if it's bag development and we draw the blank token, a few things are going to happen. First, we're going to remove from the game any Shamblers who are not in combat. So any Shamblers who are in a room without a character, we're going to remove them and then add a Shambler token to the Intruder Bag for each one that was removed. Then we will add one more Metagorger token to the Intruder Bag as well, again preferring red over blue. Then all characters who are not in combat will perform a noise roll, and then the blank token gets returned to the bag. Now that is explicitly called out here, return the blank token to the bag. So that's what tells me in the random encounter section, if you're needing to resolve an encounter and you draw a blank token, it says place a noise marker in each corridor connected to the room where the encounter took place, but it says nothing about returning the token to the bag, so I think it's just gone. But anyway, bag development is in the last step of the event phase, and then you continue play as normal. So the only other thing we need to go over is the contamination check at the end of the game. So at the end of the game, first you check, you see if the ship blew up and where's the ship going. But at that point, any characters who are alive, who are either asleep in the hibernatorium or evacuated in an escape pod, check their contamination cards. So first you take your hand, your action deck, your discard, put them all together, find all your contamination cards and start scanning them. If at least one of them is infected, you gain a mutation card, one of these. If you already have a mutation card, you just skip that step and you're going straight to step 2. So step 2 is all players with a mutation card at this point shuffle all of their cards, so your action cards, whatever was in your hand, your discard, you shuffle everything together and draw the top 4 cards. For each contamination card you draw from that top 4 cards, gain a mutation marker. And then, as usual, any character who reaches 4 mutation markers dies immediately. At that point, if you do not have 4 mutation markers, then you are lucky to survive. So that is it. That is the rules for the Carnomorphs expansion to Nemesis. And I said I would save my thoughts till the end, but I think I kind of sprinkled them throughout. But I really like this one thematically. I like that they evolve from one step to the next. That's really cool. And then I think all the rules surrounding that evolution, even though it took me a little bit to talk through them, they make sense. They hold up. It's easy to remember. They're in a room without characters during the attack phase. So starting with the biggest one, they're going to eat something and then grow even bigger. I think that's really neat. I like the Butcher not being able to fit in the technical corridors. That's kind of a fun spin. These adaptations are really cool. I like taking the character or the intruder mini from the board and then revealing the adaptation. I don't know that I love that it makes them stronger, but it's a pretty interesting mechanic. I think that's cool, and it's different in a fun way that doesn't add a lot of overhead. And then I'm really interested in this character mutation aspect of the game. I think it does something fun with contamination. My only fear is that 4 mutation markers are not going to be enough. I think those are going to accumulate quite quickly. And then I am terrified of drawing red Metagorger tokens during the bag development step because they're just going to proliferate all over the place and it's going to be a mess. But I have not played the Carnomorphs expansion yet. Of all the stuff that I've done in this series so far for Nemesis, I've been sitting on this Carnomorphs box for a long time and have not used it. So my very first playthrough is going to be the one that is released today, and you can go watch that now and see how I do. And I will be playing with the CEO and the Convict because they are the last 2 characters from both the base game and Aftermath that I've not featured in this series yet. So I'm curious to see how they hold up. I hear this expansion is very difficult, and it probably is going to crush me. But I expect I'm going to have a really good time getting crushed. So if you've got any questions, if you think I missed anything, let me know down in the comments. Happy to talk to you about it there. But I hope this video was helpful. I am really excited to check it out. You can go watch a solo playthrough now. And that's what I've got for you here. So thank you so much for watching Table for One. I will see you in the next video.